Lovely, thank you.
Okay, cheers.
A commercial EICR within a rather spooky set of railway arches. How's that for a sign? Danger 2,500 volt. So it's one of the things as a tradesman is you get access to things where people don't ordinarily go to. You do get to see some rather creepy old places. Really cool. There's all the old LV equipment for the train line above. If you're in a dark, creepy room like this and you think you're alone and turns out you're not, for me that was quite a scary thing. The actual conduit's just delaminating there, it's just falling down. Mother Nature wins every time. The old Kazi. Oh, what? Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be going through with you a commercial EICR within a rather spooky set of railway arches in Liverpool Street. If you're more familiar with doing domestic EICRs and you haven't done commercial, I think this will probably be a good opportunity to show you what some of the main things are that you probably look for, which you wouldn't ordinarily look for in a domestic situation. So let's get this underway and we'll begin with the visual examination and assessing the scope of the installation. So okay, we do have a problem with lighting here in a minute, but we're just going to walk from arch to arch, and I think the origin of the installation is this way, so come and follow us through here. Wow, here we go. Now, this certainly brings me back, this place. Reason being was, this was one of the first jobs that I done when I was 22 years old. I think we went to an emergency call out here, and this had all the original switchgear in here from, I think it was from like 1920s, 1930s. This was all the old metering equipment here. They had an old buzz bar here, and I think we had like a water ingress, and the buzz bar was completely shot to bits, and it was like rocking backwards and forwards. So we couldn't get the building back online, so we ended up doing a quotation to rip out all of this, and we actually installed all of this back in 2016, and that's my handwriting there. I think I was 21, 22 at the time. But it's really nice, it's lovely to come back to an install that I'd done a long time ago and see how it's fared up. Back into the EICR. With commercial EICRs, one of the main differences that you'll have is the scale of the EICR and sub-main distribution. So in a domestic, like I said earlier, like you just have your service head and then you have your fuse board at the top. With a commercial place, you have your service head, but then you'll have what you call branch circuits or sub-mains, which will be sub-distribution. They won't be final circuits, they'll be sub-distribution, so you have various fuse boards dotted around everywhere. And what we normally do in commercial installations is, I'll show you in a second, next door we've got the old service head next door, I'll show you that in a second, but it comes in from there, put these ladders in coming down, and then we just put in a main switch fuse disconnector here, and then we put in a 200 amp buzz bar chamber here, and what we then done was there's 4 fuse boards here, so we put 1, 2, 3, 4 fuse boards, I think L1, L2, L3, and then that is the arch next door, which we don't have access to today. That's just some really creepy old abandoned part of this arch, which we're not going to go into. This is a supply for, so where we are right now is you've got Liverpool Street Station over there, and we're pretty much just below Liverpool Street Station. And this building belongs to Network Rail, and the building is currently rented out by a client of ours. It used to be used for file storage, but now it's just a very expensive, dirty, dusty old car park. But we're sharing the space with a lot of the equipment that Network Rail use for the train line system above. And that sub-main goes over to the main switch room for where some of the LV stuff's kept for the railway track above, but we're not going to be able to go in there today. I mean, we were ahead of the time. See all that fire clipped? That was the re-termination onto the existing sub-mains. One of the considerations when you're designing electrical installation is what are the environmental factors. And one of the environmental factors that we thought of here was a damp wall. What we've done was we spaced out all of the containment. So if you come and have a look here, we spaced out all of the containment and all the switchgear on Unistrut, and it's actually stood up pretty well. There doesn't appear to be any sign of corrosion on any of the switch equipment. Yeah, I'm not sure what all this stuff is here. Like, see if you look at the brickwork there, we've got all this white stuff coming through the wall. It's like fluffy stuff. If any of you know what that is, leave it in the comments below. I suspect it's lime or something, and the way they used to do mortar, it's the old lime mortar. Right, well, let's go to the origin of the installation. Right, so this is the origin of the installation. Now, when we came here, we did speak to Network Rail and UK Power Networks at getting this sorted out. It doesn't appear to have been addressed. I mean, this isn't our equipment. This doesn't belong to any of us. This is the landlord's equipment. So, yeah, how far do you go with it when it comes to doing your job? I mean, we done our part. I mean, look at that. Look how old that is there. Look, I don't even know what that is. What's that? There's not even a brand on that, but yeah, well, this was all dead. This is disconnected. Although it is plumbed into there, it is disconnected. And this is the service head. This is a 200 amp service head. It's not in a great state of repair, really. We've got some tape there holding some bits on. This is the rifle distribution panel, which splits up to all the other arches, which aren't to do with us. But this arch used to belong to when the railway networks were all nationalised. This used to be where British Rail used to store all of the food, and when the trains would go over to Liverpool Street Station, all the food would come out of here, down there, and they'd go straight up to the station. But let's just go have a little wander. But right above us here, that is old LV equipment. How's that for a sign? Danger 2,500 volts or 25,000 volts. I don't think they're in service anymore. They must have been changed by now. The other thing that I'd like to do as part of the visual is obviously find all of the main bonding conductors to all the extraneous conductive parts entering the building. The water mains coming to the building is plastic. So the other extraneous conductive part entering the building from outside is going to be the gas. Now, there's no bonding on where the gas pipe enters these arches, so there's no bonding where it splits over there at that stopcock. So let's go over to the gas meter and let's see if we've got any bonding over there. Okay, that is the main gas meter, and well, there's no bonding to that at all. So what we could do is probably we could run a main cable from our main incomer over to where the gas pipe first enters the arches. I mean, this would be an interesting one for you guys. Here you can bond this. I mean, where do you draw the line when it comes to bonding for this building? I mean, the tenant's arch is behind there, so this isn't really the tenant's. So, like, what do you reckon? Do you reckon we should bond it there at the main intake there, or do you reckon we'll get away with just bonding it where it enters their rental property? Because there are some secondary meters inside. I don't know, leave your comments below. What would you do? Would you bond over there, or would you bond where it first enters the tenanted part of the building? But yeah, down here. Come down here. So it's one of the things as a tradesman is you get access to things where people don't ordinarily go to. But if you imagine, nearly every single room has electrics in it, so it's going to need an electrician in it, right? So you do get to see some rather creepy old places. So down here, we don't have access to this part of the building, but down here, you still see me? Down here, we are behind this door. Look at that, please ring bell. So down behind here, this is a really old derelict. Sorry, if you can still see me. This is an old derelict part of the building, and I'd love to get access in here because it's really cool. There's all the old LV equipment for the train line above. But I remember when I was here, I was on my own, and I was told about this place, and they said, "Oh, we'll get access. Network Rail going to come down. We'll get access." But at the time, we had the key code for there was a padlock here, and I remember I had to verify the submain because the submain came from our intake room there, from the main switch that I installed. So we had to go and verify it. I remember when I went to go put the key in, I thought I heard a cough, and I remember thinking that it really gave me the heebie-jeebies. And I remember unlocking the door and opening it up, and just like with this torch now, I had a small little pen light, so it was a much smaller light, so I can only see what the torch was illuminating. And I walked in, I remember I dropped the torch on the floor because there was a step up, so I remember knocking the floor, and I dropped the torch on the floor, and it shone right the way across the floor. And I remember at the time, it was pretty scary. It turns out that there were guys sleeping in there. It was just, if you're in a dark, creepy room like this, and you think you're alone, and turns out you're not. For me, that was quite a scary thing, and I obviously ran out of there. But yeah, it's really cool to be back here because it is just a place that time forgot. Okay, so what you'll find is about 60 to 70% of the faults that you'll find when you're doing an electrical safety inspection are actually performed by using your eyes. And you can see a lot of the problems just by having a look around. And normally with myself, it comes with experience. Within about the first four or five minutes, you actually get a very good understanding of how well the installation's been done, and you have an instinct for developing an insight as to what is to come. Doing the visual examination here, one of the main factors that we're going to be considering here is that this installation's old, number one, right? Which doesn't necessarily mean we're going to find problems just because something's old. But when things are old, things generally tend to deteriorate. So number one is the age. This was probably installed around the 1970s, around the 1980s. This particular fuse board is a Crabtree fuse board. These in themselves are not actually bad boards in terms of overload protection. They're pretty good boards, and they're very sturdy. So Crabtree fuse boards was an old English manufacturer, and they're very good fuse boards because they were actually built to battleship standards. So these fuse boards were actually used on they had a contract with the Royal Navy. They had a lot of military contracts. And Crabtree, one of their first main contracts was actually, they developed mine detonators. So, they were a very well established, very heavy, sturdy fuse board when they were put in. And you still see these everywhere because they just last forever. The main problems that you will have with them is when it comes to modifying circuits or having circuits buried in a wall, you don't have any RCD protection. So generally speaking, when it comes to doing adaptations of an old installation, unfortunately, like these things need to get ripped out. But starting at the fuse board, old Crabtree fuse board, if you look at the front of them, you've got like a little white tab and then a yellow tab. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think the yellow tab is 4.5 kA. The amount of current it can take before it blows up. What we often tend to find is that because a lot of these are commercial, they tend to be attached to submains. You rarely get a fault current at this position above 3K. Yeah, because by the time you factor in your ZS, you end up with a compliant KA rating. But yeah, looking at the installation, damp is a factor. God, look at that conduit. Wow, that is cattle trucked. Look at that. God, so that's got to a point what we call it's tree barked, which means that it's just delaminating the actual conduit. It's just delaminating there. It's just falling down. Look at that. Wow. Mother Nature wins every time, hands down. Well, James, we're going in. The old Kazi. Is that a light switch or not? Network Rail. So Network Rail are the largest landowners in the UK. And this is their property. This is one of their properties. Right, that's an old T12 fluorescent light fitting. You don't see those much anymore. The interesting thing with an old T12 is that they actually last far longer than any LED light would last these days. All of these lights here. All right, so that light's no longer attached to anything important. Yeah, that's not attached to anything important anymore. Literally the screw that was in the wall has just corroded and it's just fallen off the wall. Bay light hung off Earth singles cable. It's probably a Friday when that was put in. Exposed singles cabling. Exposed singles cabling. I doubt it's still connected. It's not, it's switched off over there. So we should probably recommend, we'll probably recommend decommissioning all this stuff. Just disconnecting that and decommissioning that because number one, are they ever going to use it? I don't think so. And number two, if they're not using it, it's essentially a gigantic exposed conductive part which could probably benefit from being disconnected. Okay, so the other obvious thing here is that we have quite a lot of old T8 Flory lighting. How liable to collapse is this installation should we have a fire in here? With older installations, they generally tend to be pretty good. I mean, it's all metal conduit, all surface, so a lot of it is old MICC cabling. So MICC cabling stands for Mineral Insulated Copper Conductors. It's a very old cable, very expensive cable. We rarely see it these days. Reason being is that FP200 has pretty much taken the spotlight away from MICC, and MICC is still used in certain installations, but it's going the way of the thatch roof. It's a bit of an art if you could do MICC quite well. The main benefits of MICC is that once it's actually installed, so long as you don't get moisture going into the pot of the MICC, you actually end up with a cable that should last, in my opinion, if it's in a dry environment, it should last forever, so long as it's not disturbed or touched too much. So we do have quite. If we were what we call electrical archaeologists, we could see that at some point, circa 1910. Wow, look at that. That would have been put in so that you can see an old channel on the floor there. So they would have channeled the old floor out. So this would have been where the old board would have been here. Wonder what board would have been in there. But that's so cool. MICC cabling. If you've done a lot of MICC cabling and you miss it, leave your comments below. Tell us your stories, your memories. It's always a bit of a pleasure to look around older installations because I just generally tend to find that in a time when this was put in, things weren't so rushed. People were more skilled. People took more pride in what they'd done, and it's always really nice to look around some of these older installations and see, you know, what happened. How did they do this? Like what was going on at the time? Because I'm a bit sentimental. Whenever I look at an old electrical installation, I always, in my mind for a brief moment, I always would like to think, you know, what was going on in the world at the time, like if you were a fly on the wall when they were putting this in, what were they talking about? What were working conditions like? And I do have a rose-tinted spectacle when it comes to like the 70s and the 80s and how electricians used to do things. before everything got massively deregulated, as we're going through now. Sounds a bit Fred Dibner, but you know, these are historical old things that still work. They still do the job, but not quite as safely as they could do. Perhaps it's quite a sentimental thing to say, but I think it'll be a bit of a sad day when all these Crabtree boards have all been ripped out and there's no more floating around. It's a bit of electrical history in front of us right now. Look at that. I mean, that would have been originally when this was just British Rail, and they would have had just some old dingy little spotlights coming along here, and this was probably the main switch for the whole arch. You see those old ladders up there, so that would have been for some of the original cabling, because this arch was constructed in the 1700s. This arch was constructed, so that would have been some of the original fastings for the LV equipment for the station above. Wow, that's some of the original stuff there. Look at that. You should have put a little block of wood on there, and then they'd mount their saddles on there. No, that's why it's come to the wall, I think. Okay, one of the things that you've got to be careful of, if you're in an old commercial building that's been sitting around for a while and there hasn't been anyone in there, rodents tend to populate the area. And one of the things that they carry is leptospirosis, or Wells disease. And you could quite innocently touch anything, like some old cables that are hanging around on the floor. If you touch them and put your hand in your mouth or anything like that, once you've caught Wells disease or leptospirosis, there is a good chance that you're going to die. So just be really careful with where you're putting your hands, keep washing your hands. If you are lifting old materials up or touching old materials, wear a face mask. These places are full of asbestos. There is asbestos up there. The roof's got asbestos on it, so yeah, just be careful when you're poking around old buildings, that's all. But what we're going to do, the first test that I like to do is an R2 wandering lead test. Now, I do all of my regular ZS tests, but what you tend to find is that you have loads of switches and loads of light fittings, so it's not reasonably practicable to be removing every light switch, every light fitting to check if you have an earth. So, top tip, really easy way to do that is you do your percentage check of your ZS on the circuit. So you go to the end of the circuit and do your ZS test as you normally would. But one thing I like to do is an R2 wandering lead test, because it's a very quick way of ensuring that your earthing system is correctly connected. So we'll get the wandering lead set up, we'll get it put onto the MET, and we'll get wandering around. Let's do that. Right, so obviously starting right at the beginning, if you haven't done an R2 wandering lead test before, get in the habit of doing it. It's really quick, it's really easy, and it gives you a great sense of reassurance that you've made sure that things are protected by an earthing conductor, more so in installations like this where we have the old Crabtree boards. Because if it wasn't for the conduit hanging off the wall, right, I'd be happy to pass this so long as everything was earthed. But we'll go around and just check all the exposed conductive parts of the electrical installation. This is this is like the first bit of the installation here. So if we just go along here, what you'll do is the other side of your R2 wandering lead, you'll just connect that onto the main earth terminal there of the installation. Well, this isn't the main earth terminal, but it's the easiest one to get to. So if we go, for example, onto here, yeah, 0.01 ohms, very small amount of ohms. Just go onto our trunking here, go into all of our boxes. We can see immediately that everything is earthed, and it's just reassuring for us. Okay, like for example, this conduit is not earthed. Oh no, it is earth. See this conduit here? Yeah, this conduit's not earth because it is so corroded. These are earth. Right, I'm a little bit old-fashioned in the sense that I don't use an iPad. I just prefer using a laptop. When it comes to doing EICRs commercially, domestics, you might get away with taking a photo of the fuse board and then just writing the test results down on your phone. But what happens if you do that with larger installations, it turns out to be a mess when it comes to doing the paperwork, so you're always better off doing it whilst on site. I tend to use the NIC online system. Now, the NIC online system used to be quite bad, but it's now pretty good. And I used to use Amtech for a lot of my stuff, but I've stopped using it now because the NIC software is for free and it's nearly as good as Amtech. Go to the origin of the installation whenever I do a larger job, and I would start at the busbar chamber, and the busbar chamber will get inputted onto the software as if it is a fuse board. Arch 35, 1L2, Arch 33, 36 of 1L3, and then we've got the LV room DB4, which is there, and then we've got a three-phase supply coming off, and that's that main isolator switch over there. Right, so, okay, one thing to immediately note is there is a missing screw. Alright, so the point of isolation is at the beginning. So there's no isolator switch in here, so we've had to go and switch it off at the origin just to get the cover off. So that top buzz bar is live. So there's no flash guards or anything like that. There's no flash guards at the bottom. So there are a lot of exposed live parts in these boards. So if you're not careful, they can be quite unforgiving to work on. This is interesting. I've not seen one without a main switch there. Okay, let's do some verification and we'll do some ZS tests and some ring tests. There are some rings here as well. What we're going to do, we're just going to do a bit of circuit verification. I mean, it is marked up, which is a good help for us. So what we do, we'll just write all those. What I'd ordinarily do is whatever's on the board, I'll write on the certificate, and then we'll just go through systematically verifying it. Yep. Yeah. Sweet. Cool. And then just do one over there. Just going to do just to prove that it's all dead. With these boards, there's a barrel fuse on the other side of this board, so if we did short it out, it would be pretty nasty. So it's always good just to always doubt yourself. Whenever you're working with electrics, always doubt yourself. Double check, triple check. Sweet. See? No, that's the spur. That's the ring. Oh wow, okay, a lot lower, 0.30. So right, thank you for joining us again for another episode of Mayday Electrical Solutions. In this episode, I didn't go into massive detail about the tests that we do, less of a technical video, but I thought it would make an interesting one visually, because as I said at the beginning, most of the problems that we're going to find are on a visual. And the biggest problem that we found here is these. So if you look at the lighting trunking system here, what we found is that when we take down one of those screw caps up there, what's happened is that the bricks above they've absorbed moisture and the screws are quite severely corroded. So what will happen eventually is one of them will just ping off, one of them will drop down, and it will be like a chain reaction, and then the whole thing will just come down. So what I'm thinking of doing, subject to discussion with the client, I don't know what condition this building has to be in before they give it back to the landlord. So what we'll probably do, if we just use this board as an example, currently, all they use these arches for at the minute, now it's no longer for file storage, it's pretty much for storing posh cars. So what I'll probably recommend doing is, as much as it's going to pay me to get rid of this lovely old relic, is rip it out, keep the sub-mains, just all of this goes. And we just put a new piece of trunking at the bottom, or even just a new socket or a couple of sockets so they can trickle charge the sports cars. And then we'll probably just use we'll just resupply the lighting system and then just have a row of just about 3 bay lights going down the middle. And then that's it. And then that way we've disconnected all of the really bad stuff, all the corroded conduit, all of the corroded lighting system. You know, we can be pretty sure that we've disconnected a lot of the really bad stuff. So in my mind, new board, new socket below, keep the existing submains, and a nice clean row of bay lights just at the going through the middle of each archway. So yeah, that's essentially what I was thinking of doing. Thank you very much for watching another episode of Mayday Electrical Solutions. If you've liked the video, please like and subscribe. It means a lot to us. We are quite a small channel, and it gives us inspiration to pump out more content. But other than that, thank you very much, and we'll hopefully see you in the next video.